I love Mike Hanson Archives.
You're ready to run.
Look who we got here. Somebody that we haven't seen in about 20 years is
Hello there.
Late
How are
and
you?
great, late and great
Good to see you.
George Humphrey.
Yes. Oh my goodness! I see who it is. Yes.
Tell us what you've been up to.
Oh my goodness! Isn't this a great day?
Yes.
It is amazing.
Tell us why you're here, hurry, because it's my Facebook.
My heart is heavy for the world, but my heart is also happy for the good people here. We need to get back to work, and we need to realize that this cure, it's not a cure, it's not about a virus, it's about political control. And we are free and sovereign, and we have the choice to either be slaves or to be free. I choose to be free, yes.
Well, guess what I did? I bought about $20,000 worth of editing equipment and hired some people to put all the tapes on for the last 25 years, and you're on there. So I want you to, and I'm gonna plug my YouTube channel.
Okay, great.
Mike Hanson
Of course,
Archives,
of course.
Hanson Archives, and Waco
I
Archives.
didn't recognize you at the start.
Okay, so I need you to say, this is George Humphrey, and I love Mike Hanson Archives.
This is George Humphrey, and this guy is awesome. Mike Hanson, the Mike Hanson Archives. Check it out.
You're on there. We just put about 3 tapes of you on there. And you had slick black hair then.
Now it's all dyed.
All right. God bless y'all. We'll see you in a
Okay.
minute. Hello, folks. I'm sorry to interrupt your viewing here on classic Alex Jones or Jeff Davis or Steve Lane or George Humphrey here on. Be sure to subscribe to Mike Hanson Archives. Hanson Archives, which is our newest one, and our newest one is Waco Archives. Anything we've done with Waco, we're going to put on there separately. But Mike Hanson Archives on YouTube and Hanson Archives. And we're busy putting up all these old shows. There's one of, I don't know what they're doing there. I guess they're, that's when barcodes just come out. They were complaining about it. There's Alex. And we just got through with this one over here, Alex and Steve on the Freedom Report. We have an editor over here, and she's letting it render now. But that's what we're doing here on these channels. We're putting up 25-year-old shows from Alex Jones and Jeff Davis. I was both their producers from 1995 all the way up to 2010. And it's probably 60 or 70 people doing what I used to do in Alex's office now. But if you would like to help us fund this project, write us here at 901 St. Joseph's, Gonzales, Texas. Send us $25 and I'll send you a signed copy of my book, Bohemian Grove, Cult of Conspiracy, when Alex Jones and I snuck into the Bohemian Grove back in the year 2000. Let me move my fly swatter out of the way. There is Alex and I when we were younger. Okay. We'll get you back to watching the good classics here on, what is that, Alex being arrested? But we got hundreds and hundreds of tapes to do. We got to transfer them over to from VHS over to the computer. There's Jeff Davis. All right, well, give us a call if you'd like to put it on a credit card at 830-672-3089. If you would like to write us, we're at 901 St. Joseph Street in Gonzales, Texas. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and let all your friends know about all these old shows we're putting up. They haven't been seen in 25 years. Thanks a lot, and God bless.
The victory will be in
endorsement of a philosophy. I believe in my heart of hearts the victory in 1998 is going to be good for Texas, and that's the most important thing about the campaign.
Sir, shouldn't we abolish the Federal Reserve and the CFR? That's the real reality that none of you will talk about, and most of you are members. That's what's destroying this country, Governor. Don't you stand for America, sir? What about the Federal Reserve and the CFR? You people are being lied to. This country's been taken over by Europe, and I'm being drug out. Laugh at it.
Let's grab an arm. Public symbol. Okay. Where's car? I got some glass. Grab one glass. Okay.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Freedom Report. My name, of course, is Steve Lane. I'm here tonight joined by two regulars now, Rusty Fields and George Humphreys, flanked on either side. That was the videotape of Alex going to a George Bush rally held at the DuPont plant where the public was invited, but they don't like you too much when you ask the tough questions. Now, this story was actually printed on the Round Rock Leader, and it talks about how, of course, how Alex was kicked out, but more importantly, how Mike, the cameraman in that instance, was assaulted, and Mike has filed assault charges. We just thought it was interesting to bring up one point. After showing you that, you noticed how Alex was physically removed, very forcibly removed, I might add. After he was removed, what we didn't know, because we didn't have videotape of that, is that Bush was inside saying the following, quote, "Let me just say one comment about that fella," Bush said while outside the warehouse, constables were handcuffing Jones. "Isn't it wonderful to live in a country where you're able to express your opinion the way you feel like it?" I really wish we could have had a videotape of that, because I think we would have played the audio of Governor Bush talking about how great it is to live in a country where you can express yourself and then very promptly get arrested for it and held against your will for about 45 minutes.
He failed to mention the part about you're also free to be drug off and manhandled if you try it.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Failed to mention that part.
Exactly. So I just wanted to bring that up. We're going to get to a lot of stories tonight. Later on, actually at 8 o'clock, we are going to run an interview with, hey Mike, can somebody come in here and get this phone?
Phone for you.
Actually, hey, that happens on ABC and news and stuff like that all the time. Mike, it's over here.
You hear it sometimes in the background.
Yeah, you hear the phone going off. So see, that's our hotline to the Associated Press, I guess. Anyway,
What would we want to hear from them for?
Yeah, right. Anyways.
The direct line right
the
there.
Direct line. See, Bush is watching. Anyways, I wanted to bring that up. I just thought that was an important discrepancy to point out. Bush is talking about how free we are in this country, and then he has somebody arrested, and it was only at his request of Alex being released that Alex didn't get fully processed. At any rate, we're going to get to phone calls right away, but listen, later on at 8 o'clock, we've got an interview with author and television host Tony Brown, author of Black Lies, White Lies, and also author of a new book called Empower the People, a 7-step plan to overthrow the conspiracy that is stealing your money and freedom. Tony Brown is host of Tony Brown's Journal, one of the longest-running talk shows in America, and definitely the longest-running talk show on PBS. He dispels the myth of a Jewish conspiracy quite well. He is all for black empowerment. In fact, at the little conference we saw him at this weekend, he made a joke about how if blacks could just get out of this idea that everything would be all right if white people liked them, he said, like white people get on a conference call every morning and talk to each other and say, "Oh, don't forget to keep the black people down today." So he's a very animated individual and just a powerful voice in this movement, I believe, and he's probably the first big-name mainstream individual to come out and talk openly about the Illuminati and the Federal Reserve and the things that's really keeping us not free in America. So let's get to some phone calls right away. We also got a story later on that a piece that Alex Jones put together on the Council on Foreign Relations and President Clinton talking to them. So let's go to these calls right away. Hello, caller, you're on the air. I can't hear him in here. Oh, there we go. All right. Caller, you're on the air. Bunch of good calls today. All right. Rusty's got a story that he wanted to talk about, the TNRCC.
In circumstances beyond your control, the calls are going to be screened.
Oh, okay. Well,
Okay.
there we have it.
All right.
Anyways, Rusty, go ahead and tell us about what's going on with the TNRCC.
Well, mostly I just wanted to briefly, I know we've got an awful lot of stuff tonight. I just wanted to briefly say that we are preparing a story on the TNRCC. For those of you who don't know what all these initials stand for, and a lot of them, we have so many these days, that's the Texas National Resource Conservation Committee. And they're doing some, this is a committee, by the way, that was not elected by you. Nobody voted for these people. They don't make laws, they make regulations that act like laws. Okay? We're doing a story on the TNRCC. They're really apparently doing some things that really should be considered stepping out of the bounds of their authority. So that's going to be coming up on the next show. Next week, next Monday, we'll have an in-depth report on what's going on there. But I know George has something that I want to hear, and I think everybody should hear.
Well, first of all, it's great to see you, Russ.
Hi, George. How are you?
I am really excited about seeing this Tony Brown thing. Tony
Me
Brown
too.
is a great guy, and he really talks about the empowerment of blacks and of all people, and it's really important that people watch this. One of the things that I want to talk about, I talk about economics quite a bit, and Japan has just lowered their interest rate down to their prime rate down to 1/4%. Now, folks, this is their last bullet.
The phones are ringing off the wall to the airlines now so they can go borrow some money.
Folks, in the United States, the prime rate is about 7%. In Japan, which is the second largest economy in the world, they have more economic activity in 8 days than all of Russia does in a full year. As Japan goes, all of Asia goes, and the United States goes. And as you may or may not know, Japan was holding the World Bank notes for Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, and South Korea. And they are looking at a $4 trillion debt. $1 trillion is an unbelievable amount of money, even for the Japanese. And basically what they are doing is they have turned on their printing presses. They are printing as much money or credit notes as possible. It's not money, it is credit notes, and is flooding the world market so they can figure out what they're going to do with this $4 trillion.
Including the American stock market.
Including the American stock market. Folks, this is not something we're made up. This was just in the Wall Street Journal. Here it is, right here. And it says, Japan lowers overnight rate near zero level, and the quote is, they may have used their last bullet, says Robert Allen Feldman, chief economist at Morgan Stanley. Folks, they have this. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out if you can borrow money at 1/4% and buy T-bills at 5.5%, or go and buy a stock that's going up an average of 25% a year. Folks, we've got an incredible amount of funny money out there. But the fact is that this train ride won't last forever. The stock market and the world economies are defying gravity. Even President Clinton last week says we are facing the largest economic crisis in the last 50 years. There is going to be an economic correction. It's not just going to happen in South Korea. It's not just going to happen in Italy. It's not just going to be in Mexico, and it's just not going to be in Japan. It is coming to the United States, and we have to be ready. And folks, for those of you who are listening, get out of your IRAs, get out of your 401ks, get out of debt, because the American stock market is going to go down. When Richard Nixon left office, within months, the stock market lost half of its value. It is very clear that President Clinton is either going to be impeached or resigned. The The rats are getting off the boat. The Democratic elected officials are coming out, they're lining up to say he did wrong. And the only reason that's slowing this thing down is that the Republican Party wants to drag this thing out because the elections are coming up. I mean, this is the most incredible thing in the whole world. The Republicans are going, now just let's not rush to judgment.
We want
let's
this
just,
president.
yeah, you know, let's
let's
not, you know, get him. While the Democrats realize that they've got a tremendous political liability, and folks, the Republicans want a sick president up there so that they can win this, not only these elections coming up, but that they will run against a weakened president in the year, you know, and so that when Gore comes
the China connection
absolutely.
For Gore. See, I believe that. I a little bit disagree. I don't think he'll get impeached, or I think here's what I honestly think is going to happen. I think he's going to go before the House Judiciary Committee, and he's going to be questioned, and the Republicans are actually going to ask questions about the lying and things like that, not questions about the sex, because they're not going to run the risk. They can see the public backlash about all this sex.
Absolutely.
I think they wanted this videotape of him out so bad because it actually makes him look good. I think they were getting to the point where they were going to have to impeach him, whether they liked it or not. I think the Republicans wanted this videotape to come out because everything I've heard about it, I haven't had a chance to see it today, says that it actually makes Clinton look a little bit better than what he did a few days ago.
I would disagree. I would disagree with that. Anyway,
and then just to finish the train of thought, to keep him in power, censure him. They're not going to do anything before the elections, though, because if they just censure him, they're going to anger. excuse me. The Republicans are going to anger their constituency because their constituency wants him out. And if they just censure him before the elections, I think their constituency is going to get angered, maybe rebel against him a little bit. I think nothing's going to happen until after the elections. When it does, I think it's just going to be censure, keep him in office, like you said, severely weakened, push through the kind of stuff they want to push through. Then we're going to see the China connection brought up in the campaign finance scandal against Gore and install George W. Bush as president. And that's what I really
For those of you who are not aware, the Republicans have almost as much dirt on Al Gore, and it's not dirt. He's flat broke the law. It's the real deal. There are laws in this country, and we're supposed to be a country, a democratic, a constitutional republic where the laws are equal and just for every person. Of course, we are not seeing that. And the fact is that both the president and the vice president have grossly broken the law, and what we're experiencing is something that is very, very critical for our country. And unless we as citizens of this country demand that there is equal justice for both Democrats and Republicans, we are going to lose our constitutional republic.
You're right, George.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And you know, to comment on what Steve was saying, it's true. The the Republicans have already set the stage for the censure thing.
Right.
They've set the stage by saying it's not enough. That's not enough. Censure's nothing. I've heard 2 or 3 quotes. That censure's nothing. It's not even a slap on the wrist. So that's inappropriate and not enough.
And folks, one of the things that we keep saying on this show is that this whole thing that is going on right now is a big charade. It's all a deception. It is a way to get the American people off on a rabbit trail. There are issues that are so much more important than the soiled dress of Monica Lewinsky and his sexual affairs. I don't think what he's done is appropriate or moral as far as what he's done with Monica Lewinsky. But what President Clinton, that we all know, has done, starting with other women. Catherine Wiley last year had a press conference in which she said the president assaulted her, basically. And yet the predominant media did nothing. Paula Jones, and I think in the deposition, President Clinton has said it, you know, we don't need to go into that, but there's many, many, many other women. But that's only a very small part of it. There is perjury. There is obstruction of justice. But then we get into the real big deals. The fact that the President of the United States knowingly and consciously sold the Red Chinese at no cost at all through the L'Oreal Corporation, through his Secretary of State, Ron Brown, technology to give the Red Chinese the ability to pinpoint their ICBMs on United States cities. Not even the Russians, who are absolutely broke, would do that. Now, supposedly, any technology transfer should go through the Department of Defense or the Secretary of State.
And Department of Commerce and all that other stuff.
And so he did it through the Secretary of Commerce, through Ron Brown. And as we all know, Ron Brown was his street operative, and Ron Brown was not a very reputable man. And Ron Brown was taking huge amounts of kickbacks, especially from the South Vietnamese government. And after Ron Brown brokered this deal in which the L'Oreal Corporation gave very, very important missile technology to the Red Chinese, within months, several charges came down on Ron Brown, not just only from the FBI, from the Secretary of Defense, and also from his own Secretary of Commerce. He went to President Clinton and said, "Get me out of this." Clinton said there was no way. And within a week after this, his plane went down in Croatia. And folks,
It accidentally stumbled into a mountainside.
folks, this is incredible. You have to be aware of this. Our Secretary of Commerce, flying on Air Force 2, crashed into a mountain near Sarajevo. And in the official story, they said it was the worst storm in the history of Croatia. In fact, there was a 14-mile-per-hour headwind, there was a slight mist, and 15 planes had landed at the same airport in the hour preceding.
Without incident.
Without incident. There was no problem there. And the transponders were switched. The plane went down. The Croatian government went up there. They had the black box. They broadcast that they had the black box. The United States Marines did not get up there until 11 hours later, in which time they said the black box disappeared. And there were over 20 witnesses who said that there was a survivor. I forgot her name. She was the airline stewardess, but they freighted her back to Sarajevo, and by the time she got back to Sarajevo, guess what? She had died of no, she died of blood loss.
Yeah.
And folks, about 2 months ago, the two top pathologists of the United States Air Force had a press conference, and guess what they said? And they showed. They had an X-ray of Ron Brown's skull with a 45 hole bullet in the top of his head. Guess what happened to these guys? They were put under house arrest. Guess what happened to all the bodies that were, and there were 35 bodies on board, which were mostly American citizens. Clinton ordered them to be cremated. Folks, this is amazing. This is not just bad judgment or lapse of judgment. This is cold-blooded murder. And all the information is there. It's all objective. I don't want to talk about this. I hate talking about this. But the facts are the facts. And unless we as the citizens of this United States stand up and demand that there be appropriate justice, then this stuff keeps going on. With the Ron Brown plane going down for the first time in the history of American avionics, when a plane went down in friendly territory, there was no investigation. Folks, we need to be aware of not only the scandal that is happening, but the absolute tyrannical control of this President of the United States. He looks like a nice guy, he talks like a nice guy, but folks, his actions speak louder than words. Steve, it's good to have you back here.
Well, thank you very much.
Welcome back, Steve.
Yeah.
What time are we? Okay, good.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about one more thing real quickly, and that is some IRS, our good friends at the IRS. And Rusty, do you want to talk about this, take this, or?
The bagmen, you've got your glasses on already.
Bagmen.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll
the
tell you what.
bagmen for the Federal Reserve? Why,
Here we just got this off the internet, and you all can get this too. The IRS is buying $200,000 worth of Remington shotguns, 8-shot shotguns. Now in the United States, you can only have 6 shots in your shotgun, but they've got 8 shots. These are a special model.
Wait, isn't
are you
this
trying to say they're above the law, George?
This is the no.
That's only the
That's
only the frosting.
No, I saw on the national news that the IRS is reformed now. So.
Oh, the new friendly IRS.
Yeah, this is the customer friendly.
The new customer friendly has just ordered $1 million of semi-automatic handguns. What are they going to do? Very friendly. Now they've also bought $200,000 worth of clock, radio, audio, video transmitters. In other words, they have little clocks with little cameras in them so that they can spy on you. They also have bought $50 million worth of support in encryption radios. They bought $1 million of sub-miniature audio recorders and playback units. They have got, let's see here, what else do they have here? They have bought $1 million worth of conversion of surveillance equipment. Folks, if you take a look at what they've got here, they are preparing for a full-time assault on the privacy of the United States citizens. All this BS about the newer, friendlier IRS is just that.
BS.
It's meant to divert you.
It is meant to
Make you
divert
feel
us.
good.
And the fact is the IRS is unconstitutional, it is inefficient, and it's run by thugs. And there's a better way. Of course we need money for the federal government, but we don't need to do it in a way that we're doing it like this. Our founding fathers talked about the collection of taxation and revenues quite clearly. In the Federalist Papers, they talked about it all over. Folks, we need to read our Constitution and understand history.
In fact, speaking of Federalist Papers, Chris or Mike, somebody, I've got that in there, and I need to use that for a quote later on. So could you bring that it's a paperback version of it in here. But you're exactly right. In there it talks about it, how a couple of the founding fathers, a couple of the people that wrote in the Federalist Papers, I don't remember which one right now, said that they would lament if we ever had a head tax, which of course is an income tax. When you translate into modern day translation.
And let's go ahead and add insult to injury. Folks, you're paying for all of this.
Yeah.
You get to pay for all of this. What they're going to do to you, you're paying for.
And that's a fact. It is a fact, even by the most conservative estimates. If you work a 5-day, 40-hour work week, 3 days, the first 3 days, you're working for some form of government or another, whether it's the state, municipality, sales tax, something. The first 3 days of your 5-day work week is spent paying for taxes. The last 2 days is actually money you get to spend on your family and yourself and your friends and that sort of thing. There's an interesting quote here in this book, Empower the People, that I thought you would be interested in hearing. And he quotes the paper he gets it out of. But this is from Alan Greenspan, who is now the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. I think you'll be shocked to hear this and shocked at what he says about this. But it says, quote, deficit spending is simply a scheme for the, quote, hidden confiscation of wealth. Gold stands in the way of this insidious process. It stands as a protector of property rights. If one grasps this, one has no difficulty in understanding the statist antagonism toward the gold standard. And that was, I'm not kidding, Alan Greenspan, chairman of the Federal Reserve Board.
The interesting thing about this is that Alan Greenspan clearly is one of the most intelligent men in this country. He's also probably the most powerful bureaucrat. And in the late 50s, 60s, and early 70s, Alan Greenspan would have been right here on the show saying the exact same things that we say. He was very much for the Constitution, he was for constitutional money, and he was for the Bill of Rights. After 20 years of being blackballed, he finally got it. He finally said, I want to make it in Wall Street, I want to make it with the big dogs, and he started changing his tune. And as soon as he started changing his tune and he joined the Council on Foreign Relations and he changed his point of view, he suddenly went up the ladder. And now he is the most powerful bureaucrat in the world. And folks, he keeps giving us clues about once every 4 or 5 months. He knows what he's doing is wrong.
They quoted
he knows
in here
what
about
he's doing
that.
is
No,
wrong.
really. That's what he talked about in here. He said that there was a quote in here. I don't have it in front of me. Oh, here we go. Larry Parks, executive director of FAME, which stands for the Foundation for the Advancement of Monetary Education, had asked him a question, asked him whether he still agreed with the idea of the gold standard. And Greenspan said absolutely, and added that he recently reread the article. That is the article that I just quoted from. It's a 1966 article called Gold and Economic Freedom. In response to why he no longer speaks out, Greenspan said that these are not popular ideas among some of, quote, my colleagues at the Fed. Another quote, but you know where all of this is leading to. He said he gave the man a pained look and walked on. And this is what Tony Brown says about this. Greenspan, I want to believe, is essentially an honest man. I'm sorry to see him nearing the end of his life with so much power and so little integrity, exactly what you just spoke of. In the end, he is at best a puppet of the very system of welfare statism that he condemned as evil. So I mean, it ties right into what you were talking about earlier, this idea of deficit spending and what's going on in Japan right now. And it affects us because, like you said, a lot of that money they're investing in the stock market. And when their economic chickens come home to roost, they're going to have to sell off those stocks to have some capital to pay the stuff that's going on back home, to take care of the stuff that's going on back home. And when that happens, that's a trigger for our stock market, especially when you tie in this computerized selling and things that goes on in Wall Street. And we might even be seeing the beginning of that, kind of the corrections we've seen here recently. All it might take is just this one last little thing to kind of push it over the cliff. Is that more or less correct?
Folks, money is supposed to represent work and value. Now, if you don't pay your bills, they come and get your car, they take your house. If you have a business and you don't pay for your inventory, you close your business. The United States government has had deficit spending on its operating budget 46 out of the last 47 years. The total debt of the United States federal government is approximately $19.4 trillion, not including interest. If you add in state and local debt, if you add in corporate debt, and if you add in personal debt, the debt in the United States on a very conservative number is close to $32 trillion, which is 50% greater than the gross domestic product of this country. Folks, we are not moving toward bankruptcy. We've passed that point long ago.
Far beyond it.
We're far beyond that, and it just, everything goes in cycles. And unless we become aware of that and prepare ourselves for this, then we're just going to get worse and worse. And all of this is a created and orchestrated problem. What we have is not money in this country. We have Federal Reserve notes, which are absolutely 180% opposed against what our founding fathers talked about, which is constitutional money. What you've just talked about, for example, the gold standard, there's not been an audit on Fort Knox since 1952. Nobody knows if the United States has any gold at all.
He estimates that there's maybe only $15 billion left.
Nobody knows.
That, very little of it's actually what they call pure gold or good gold,
right.
Which is, I think, is 0.995% purity. It's all that's basically left is what Roosevelt came and confiscated from our grandparents and in terms of coins and melted down. That's what is, by most people's estimates, left. Every bit of it was shipped to Europe, basically.
Folks, what we are saying sounds so radical and so horrible, but the fact is, the objective historic fact is that what we're talking about, this conspiracy we're talking about, is not just in the last couple of years. It's not just the conspiracy not to tell about Bill Clinton's sexual affairs. This is the conspiracy to overthrow the constitutional republic of the United States. This is a conspiracy to destroy the economy of the United States so that there is chaos. And then in Roman law, the first question is cui bono? Who benefits? People say, why would they want to do this? Why would they want to hurt the economy of the United States? Well, because if you create a fiat money system and you create that, then you have nothing to lose. But if you get control of everybody's assets, their hard assets, their farms, their factories, their cars, their homes, and you get them in so much debt that they have to give you their hard assets and you take over, then the power elite benefit.
Control. It's not just economic control. I mean, it is literal control, and it's complete elimination of a middle class to where all you have is the extreme rich and the extreme poor. It's feudalism all over again. You have serfs and kings, and that's basically all that's left of it. It's not just about wealth transfer. It's like what you just said. It's about total control of your life.
Right. Because there is no money right now. There is no money out there. All those green things that you've got are Federal Reserve notes.
And it's only worth something because you and I agree that
it's
worth something.
The
second that perception disappears,
exactly.
the worth disappears.
And you've seen this happen in Argentina, you've seen this happen in Germany, you've seen this happen in Mexico, that they have in Russia
good, she's
right
bringing
now.
Up a call. Did you just bring up a call? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, let's hear from the public. Go ahead, punch a button.
Caller, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yeah,
Hello.
Go ahead.
Hey, good evening, guys.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good show.
Thanks.
Listen, I had a question for Mr. Humphrey with regard to Japan printing up all that money to, I guess, get their economy going. I don't think it would be so bad that they're printing up all this money. If they, along with printing up all the money, they raised the reserve requirement in the banks so that all this money would not be in circulation. As they print all this money in circulation, they also raise the amount of reserves in the bank, like sort of not like we do it now, where we do deficit banking and a fractional reserve banking. You know, they loan their money into circulation, and they also have fractional reserve, where if they put $1 billion into circulation, then the banks could loan out up to $70 billion, and they have no reserve. If the Japanese right now raised the reserves in their banks, I think they would stabilize their economy. But that's not going to be the case, since the Federal Reserve, controls them. The IMF controls Japan as well as the United States, so that's not going to happen.
Exactly. And the first thing in the armistice, after we dropped 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese, after they had already surrendered. I hope people realize the Japanese had already surrendered by the time that we dropped bombs on them. But one of the reasons that we went to war with Japan is because that they had the audacity back in the 1920s to set up their own banking system and get the British out of England.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. And they set up a fractional reserve banking system after the war, almost exactly the same as the United. Not exactly.
Yeah, you're
the same.
on the air.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hello.
How y'all doing?
Fine, how are you?
I'm doing good. My name is Rick Oliver, and I've been talking with, Mike and Alex about my own problem with the IRS.
Oh, I know who you are, Rick. Go ahead.
George, I want to say good evening. Mike Hanson gave me your number, and I need to call you. I was one of a small group of founding members of CATS in Atlanta, in Georgia. In fact, while I have you on the air, and I'll get your attention, I'm proud to say that in a Kroger grocery store, I'm the guy that introduced Newt Gingrich to CATS. Oh. So I need to contact you because we've lived here in Austin for 2 years, and I really need to get back in the swing of things. I love to walk through neighborhoods and hand people pamphlets and everything else.
Now, you're the one that the IRS is shaking down pretty bad, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I just delivered a check today for $6,990.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I've had an ongoing thing with them for 25 years, but for the last 11 years, and I'm going to make this very brief because I know you have other callers, I had a small business. I had my degree is in electrical engineering, and I worked for, well, I can say this because we're still here in Austin. I work for GE Medical Systems, and I have to be careful about divulging my identity nationwide because we know that the IRS will seek, what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, if you pay, they'll continue shaking you down.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, they'll give GE a hard time. Then I lose my job, and then I'm living under a bridge off Interstate 35. When I had my guard service, I closed it in June of 1987. In January of 1989, I get this call from a revenue officer in Atlanta claiming that I still owed withholding taxes. I told him that that couldn't possibly be, that we were always very faithful about making our deposits. So he said, I need $2,324 as quickly as possible. In my naivety, I brought all of my records and a cashier's check for $2,000. We only had about $2,020 in the bank. And I met with this man, gave him the check, and he took the box of records off the desk and set it on the floor behind him.
Yeah, didn't even look at it.
I'm sorry?
Didn't even look at it, did he?
Oh, no. Because I told him, I said, you know, you're welcome to make copies of anything. And he said, well, they're mine now. His name was Mr. Green, by the way. This was in the days when we were dealing with Mr. Green and Mrs. Blue and Mr. Red, you know, and Mrs. White, okay? Well, Mr. Green kept the box on the floor, and I said, but those records belong to me. And he showed me, he pulled open his coat jacket, and he showed me a pistol in a shoulder holster in the IRS office in the Koger Center in Doraville, Georgia.
I'm sorry if we're not shocked. Because
and he said, they are mine now. Now, when I dealt with Miss Rosa Cisneros in the taxpayer advocate office, oh, don't you just love that term?
Oh, yeah.
When I dealt with her out of sheer frustration, when I got the next nasty note, after 5 times in all these years, I have gone through through problem resolution, and had somebody at the IRS finally tell me, "Oh yes, yeah, I think I understand what happened. I'll fix it." 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years later, this would come back. Well, I threw my hands in the air about a month ago, and I called the IRS when I just got another letter back at the beginning of August. And I said, "Look, here we go again. I thought this had been resolved." This interest is compounded hourly, by the way. So Miss Cisneros asked me, "Well, do you have your 1040 records?" And I said, "Yes, back through 1987. Well, guess what? She showed me a printout that conveniently showed that Mr. Green had credited the $2,324 to my 1986 1040, which I had explained to her is with my ex-wife or in the trash. I didn't have the 1986 1040, so that's where I was told the money was going. So out of sheer frustration and I give up, you win, I took out a loan against my 401k for $7,000. Went and got a cashier's check this morning. Mike and Steve wanted to go, but there was no way. They had other things that they needed to do. They wanted to film me giving them the check.
Right.
But Alex is interested. I really have 25 years of harassment because every couple of years there's been these wild tax bills. Now, George, I think you'll get a kick out of this. I think there is a conspiracy going on because I too knew that the Japanese were about to drastically lower the prime rate. You just made me fall off my couch about 15 minutes ago when you told me that it was down to 0.25%. I didn't know they were gonna dump cash like they dumped steel.
That's a good point. Very good point.
I really believe this, that the Internal Revenue Service, let me be accurate, our new friendly Internal Revenue Service,
customer friendly,
is in the process of squeezing as many people as they possibly can in order to get money in the coffers to prepare for what's coming down the pike. And what's coming down the pike, I believe, is, as George said, a financial disaster. Now, how desperate this becomes. I mean, are we headed for another world depression? It's very possible. I certainly see some serious dips in the stock market. Most of my 401k is in stock.
Really, you haven't seen Monica and Clinton? That's what they want you to focus on.
Oh, sure, sure, absolutely. When I was in college, there was this goes back to 1971, this actually occurred. There was a Spanish student on a student visa that stole my wallet. I was in New York, filed a police report. I knew he stole it. Everybody else in this particular class knew he stole it. But of course, it was the New York City Police Department, and yeah, we'll take care of it, and nothing happened. It didn't occur to me until the late 80s that he may have been using my Social Security number all these years. Because every 2 to 3 years I would get these oddball tax bills, take my federal income tax return down to the IRS, and they would say, well, everything looks okay. The easiest thing for you to do, Mr. Oliver, is to just pay it, which I would.
Well, yeah.
Because I am a
Easy
dummy.
for them.
I'm one of the sheep.
I wouldn't quite go that far. I mean, when the type of tactics they use, I wouldn't be embarrassed about having done that many times. I mean, that's the kind of fear they instill in us in the country. Listen, I don't mean to be rude. We've got to get to this tape of Alex that put together with the CFR. I know Alex is going to do a story with this. If he doesn't do a videotaped one, I know he's going to get you on the air. I'll be in touch with you, I'm sure, this week. Is there any quick thing you want to say before we go?
Yeah, I want to say thanks for being there, guys. And my wife and I are tremendous fans. George, I have your number. I'm going to give you a call sometime tomorrow or the next day so that I can start getting active again with cats. Steve, thank you so much for this time.
Hey, no problem.
And I look forward to hearing from you guys. You guys take care.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. All right, we're going to let him go. And we've got a tape queued up right now of that Alex put together on the Council on Foreign Relations and President Clinton's address to them. So, Mike, if you got that, go ahead and run that. And then when we get back, we'll, of course, run the tape, the interview with Tony Brown, author and television show host.
Do
and
not
radio show
miss
host.
Tony Brown. You've
Yeah,
got to
this
see
is
Tony Brown.
important.
This is going to be fabulous. You'll love this. But here's Alex.
Back to square one.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the President of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Clinton gave this speech 2 days after I asked the governor about it. You see, they're all part of the same club, guys. Until we realize this, we're not going to get anything fixed. Now, I'll go through some oxymorons and some doublespeak that the president engages in. He will thank David Rockefeller. He will say, I wish I could listen to what y'all have to say. Y'all know more than I do. All the rest of this BS. Guys, he is kissing their butt. And for good reason. These are the people that control Alan Greenspan, they control Clinton, they control most of the governments of Europe. He'll talk about free market reforms here in a second. It's funny, though. The CFR and the IMF told Russia to quadruple taxes. That's not a free market reform, and then their economy crashed. Why would they want that? Perhaps a criminal consolidation of wealth? Let's go through some of his speech. Please bear with William Jefferson Blythe Clinton. That's his name, you know. The team.
I'm glad to see Dick Holbrook over here. I hope if we can overcome the inertia of Congress, he will soon be a member of the team again. And I thank David Rockefeller and Les Gelb and others who welcomed us here today. The subject that I want to discuss, let me just say one thing in advance. I'm going to give you my best thoughts. We have been working on this for 3 years at some level of intensity or another. Going back to the Naples G7 meeting in the aftermath of the Mexican financial crisis. I have done everything I could do personally to reach out across the country and indeed across the world.
Oh, Master, save me,
for
David.
any new ideas
Keep me safe,
from
David.
any source.
Oh, David Rockefeller. Oh.
I'm going to give you my best thinking today about what we can do. But I want you to know that I'm here, and if I had my druthers, this would be about a 3-hour session where I'd give this talk and then I would listen for the rest of the time.
But I'll meet with
So
David
I want
later.
to encourage you, if you think we're right, to support us. But if you have any ideas, for goodness sake, share them.
Okay, I will share my ideas with you, President Clinton. Resign now, but first abolish the Federal Reserve, abolish the IRS, and admit that you are a CFR out of Europe traitor. Please, sir, give us all the names of your contacts. Come out with it, Clinton, please. But I guess you won't. You're a machine of terror and lies and smiley-faced bureaucratic BS.
I thank David Rockefeller. I thank David Rockefeller. I thank David Rockefeller and Les Gelb and others who welcomed us here today. Others who welcomed us here today.
Look, I don't want to sit here and be nitpicky about the president, but take a long look at the strange body language. Is he pleading to David Rockefeller that is sitting to his right? Or is he giving him a hateful look? This is a guy who's a master of body language. We've all seen the Ron Brown tape where he's coming out of the funeral laughing and in 2 seconds goes to tears as soon as he sees a camera. I don't know if there's some inner fighting going on or what. I know he gave David Rockefeller the Freedom Award and said there were only 2 people back in 1968 that thought I could be president. That was my mama and David Rockefeller. And then he gave him the Freedom Award. Probably the most powerful man in the world and probably the most evil, in my opinion, David Rockefeller. People that made their money off Hitler and Stalin. By all means, they did. That's historical fact. UT professors, you know it's true. How dare you support these criminals? But I'm taking too long here. Let's get into the meat of the speech, not just strange body language and thanking the Rockefellers.
Is that for the last decade, the growth of freedom around the world, with more than half the people in the world living under governments of their own choosing. More than half the villages, the 1 million villages in China now, even electing their own governments. And this sweeping replacement of command and control economies by market economies. I think it seems to have happened so easily, so effortlessly, so inexorably.
Where do you want me to start? He just said that China is electing its own people. Oh, yes, it's so free with 30 million enslaved labor camps. Oh, yeah, that's really loving and good, sir. Running over people with tanks in Tiananmen Square for having Statue of Liberties and American flags. And then you talk about free market reforms worldwide. Central governments are growing. Oh, the old line communism that Mr. Rockefeller funded, his father did, has fallen apart, and we've fully taken over. Not we, but you, the CFR. Now listen to the code language. Talking about how free market reforms, remember, they're calling China free and big government free, so everything is backwards. It's doublespeak. He's calling that freedom. He's calling that free market reforms. So what does it mean when he says how easily they're taking over the world, or free market is? That means slavery is. Listen to the code language. Yes, they're subduing us quite easily. We're laying down quite well. There's worse to come, though.
The last decade, the growth of freedom around the world, with more than half the people in the world living under governments of their own choosing. More than half the villages, the 1 million villages in China now, even electing their own governments. And this sweeping replacement of command and control economies by market economies. I think it seems to have happened so easily, so effortlessly, so inexorably.
Okay, well, you've heard the doublespeak. I'm not going to get back into that statement anymore. Yes, central banks controlled by Europe and London and New York are taking over. We'll get into Russia in just a few minutes. It's a perfect textbook example of what we've done to them. Why do I keep saying that? It's not we, it's them, CFR.
Obviously, we have profound interest here. It is a great irony that we are at a moment of unsurpassed economic strength at a time of such turmoil in the world economy. We, I think all of us in this room know that our future prosperity depends upon whether we can work with others to restore confidence, manage change, stabilize the financial system, and spur robust global growth.
Well, that's wonderful, President Clinton. Now, what did you just talk about? Managed global economies. Is that free market? I thought earlier that we're moving away from command and control. You know, if I wasn't so lazy, I'd go back and put those clips together, but I'll trust the people saw it earlier. Did you see what he did? He said moving away from command and control, and now we need global management and managed change and all the rest of this. Now, I'm trying to get it straight here. They're taking our money, U.S. taxpayer money, going and paying off politicians from Indonesia to Russia to quadruple their taxes to pay the IMF profits. But the politicians in those countries get to keep the kickback money. Who suffers? The people of the planet, not that filth on the screen and the filth in that audience.
Clearly, the balance of risks has now shifted, with a full quarter of the world's population living in countries with declining economic growth, or negative economic growth. Therefore, I believe the industrial world's chief priority today, plainly, is to spur growth. It seems to me there are 6 immediate steps we should take to help contain the current financial turmoil around the world.
Okay, before we get into the 6 command and control steps, let's back up to what he just said. President Clinton just said to the CFR and David Rockefeller that, quote, we need to spur economic growth. We need free market reforms. Russia did what we told them 2.5 months ago. They quadrupled the income tax. Now, that's the problem. All these third world nations are in such incredible debt to the IMF and the World Bank, just like we are Americans. It's total lies. It's total doublespeak up there on the podium. This is a public meeting, people. The CFR is secret. They've only been having public meetings for the last 19 months, by the way, and they're all this garbage. They are liars. Not what they say, but what they do. That's what you watch. and they told Russia to quadruple taxes. They told Indonesia. They told South Korea. That is not free market. It's to pay them the money. God.
Clearly, the balance of risks has now shifted, with a full quarter of the world's population living in countries with declining economic growth, or negative economic growth. Therefore, I believe the industrial world's chief priority today, plainly, is to spur growth. It seems to me there are 6 immediate steps we should take to help contain the current financial turmoil around the world, and then 2 longer-term projects in which we must be involved. To take the immediate first, we must work with Japan, Europe, and other nations to spur growth. Second, we will expand our efforts to enable viable businesses in Asia to emerge from crippling debt burdens so they can once again contribute to growth and job creation. Third, we've asked the World Bank to double its support for the social safety net in Asia to help people who are innocent victims of financial turmoil.
Well, I mean, what is he talking about? That's political payoffs to the governments to quadruple taxes. That's going to help the people. I mean, it's international welfare. They get them sucked in, get them addicted like a heroin addict, and they put them on the slave reservation. That's the world system. It's unbelievable, and it destroys nations, but it consolidates their power, don't worry.
Fourth, we'll urge the major industrial economies to stand ready to use the $15 billion and IMF emergency funds to help stop the financial contagion from spreading to Latin America and elsewhere. Fifth, our Ex-Im Bank, under the leadership of Jim Harmon, will intensify its efforts to generate economic activity in the developing world immediately in the next 3 months. And sixth, Congress must live up to its responsibility for continued prosperity by meeting our obligations to the International Monetary Fund. Secretary Rubin has been working with his counterparts in the G7 to get cooperative support for several of these measures. I understand Chairman Greenspan is also consulting with his counterparts on these items as well. As we take these immediate steps, we also must intensify our efforts to reform our trade and financial institutions so that they can respond better to the challenges we now face and those we are likely to face in the future. We must build a stronger and more accountable global trading system, pressing forward with market opening initiatives, but also advancing the protection of labor and environmental interests, and doing more to ensure that trade helps the lives of ordinary citizens across the globe. Above all, we must accelerate our efforts to reform the international financial system. Today, I have asked Secretary Rubin and Federal Reserve Board Chairman Greenspan to convene a major meeting of their counterparts within the next 30 days to recommend ways to adapt the international financial architecture to the 21st century.
What he's talking about is banking consolidation, okay? They're taking everything over. Get ready. I'm sure you're going to love it. If you love Hitler, if you love Stalin, if you love Mao, you are going to love this, my friends. You're going to love it.
All right, we are back. Sorry, right in the middle of a conversation there. We'll have to continue that later. Now, we had a couple of plugs coming up here. Rusty wanted to talk about a rally against Costco, which is the China Overseas Shipping Company down in Houston.
That's correct. This is the company that a year and a half ago was shipping AK-47s into the Long Beach harbor and then selling them to the Crips in Los Angeles. Our good friends, the communist Chinese.
I should bring that story. You made me think of something. I should bring that story on sometime. Danny New, the father of Michael New, Michael New is the young Army specialist who stood up and didn't wear the UN uniform, sent me an article about the United Nations, about how they know that the problem with guns in the world, the only problem is governments sell them to criminals. And it's a well-known fact within the UN, but yet they're trying to get control of different societies.
Let me repeat this one more time. This is not, I mean, I couldn't make this up. This same company was found shipping AK-47s into the Los Angeles area and selling them to drug gangs.
Now that's just a fact. Like that's not
Fact.
disputed.
It's
you didn't
not-
guess
no,
this.
no,
It's,
it's
like
like-
in mainstream
it's
news.
absolutely
Folks, we don't make this stuff up, and you can find.
We're not smart
You
enough
need to
to.
go. You need to go find this out for yourself. You need to go and discover this, so you will know it as truth, not as speculation, because you heard it on television. Okay, and that's mostly what you hear on television is someone else's agenda and speculation. I also wanted to mention, to go right along with that, there's a big rally. As a matter of fact, it's going on all over the country. I think the center of it is from Long Beach, but it's going on all over the country this Saturday at noon, and there's one in Houston, and they're going to be at the Chinese legation or whatever. I'm not sure if they have an embassy in Houston, but there's a Red Chinese
And you've got a number for that
facility, and there's
because we
a
don't know
phone
the
number here
address.
where you can call and get more information if you want to go and support this. The phone number is 713-433-8109. Okay? 713-433-8109. Okay, so that's a number you can call for more information, where to go. It supposedly starts at 12 noon this coming Saturday. The anti-Costco rally. Costco is the Chinese national shipping firm, of which George and Steve just spoke of so lovingly.
And this is the same company who has taken control of the Panama Canal former American military bases on both the Mediterranean side and the Pacific side.
Or the Caribbean side.
The
and
Caribbean
Pacific
side, yeah.
if-
No longer do Americans have control of the Panama Canal. Folks, this is pretty serious
Communist
stuff.
Chinese.
Communist Chinese do. Again, we don't make this stuff up.
As my son would say, this is way too real. This is way too real.
Also, too, there is a rally at the state capitol on Sunday, October the 25th at 1 o'clock p.m. It's put on by the Peaceable Texans for Firearms Rights. They just want people to come out, and I imagine they're going to talk about, it looks like here, the Brady Instant Check. And there you see the slate up there about that. And for more information, call 512-476-2299. And of course, the annual, I believe this is the second annual UN flag burning that's coming up here. And I believe, do you have a good? Because I don't have it in front of me. It's the second annual UN flag burning, and that's Saturday, October 24th.
That's this coming Saturday.
That is, no, October.
Is that not this coming?
October.
October. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's also at the Texas State Capitol. That begins at 12 o'clock noon. And for more information about that, call 512-331-9212. That's the second annual UN flag burning. Hopefully there won't be a burn ban on, and that can be done properly. Now we're going to get to this videotaped interview that I did with Tony Brown, author of this most recent book, Empower the People. He also wrote a book called Black Lies, White Lies. There you notice the slate on the screen, by the way, of Jeff Davis' show. And if you want to email Jeff Davis, for more information about that UN flag burning and the Chinese flag burning, you can email Jeff at that address there, or you can also visit his website at that URL. But at any rate, I was fortunate enough, and I want to thank Elizabeth. Elizabeth is a very nice lady who feeds us a lot of information, so much, in fact, that we couldn't possibly get to all of it. All of it's outstanding information. She was nice enough to tip me off that Tony Brown was a keynote speaker at the BOSS conference, and I'm sorry, that's an acronym, and I don't remember what it stands for, but he spoke at the BOSS conference. Did I say an acronym? Is that correct?
Whatever.
Close enough. It means something.
Anyways,
it stands for something, probably not good.
At any rate, she tipped me off that he was going to be there. We went down there, couldn't find him, but another nice lady gave us his telephone number at the hotel he was staying at, and I called him that night, and we had a little conversation. He agreed to do a videotaped interview with me, plus he went on the Alex Jones show. Alex Jones, of course, his radio show over at KJFK, one of our sponsors, 98.9. He started off doing a 30-minute interview with Alex over there at 98.9 on Saturday. It ended up, Tony liked him so much, they did an hour and 10-minute interview, and it really was fantastic. It was the best interview I've ever heard Alex do, because they were not competing with each other, they were building upon each other. And it was really neat to hear the play that was going on. And for people who think that Alex is a little off or something, they need to get a copy of that interview, because these guys say exactly the same thing. Their mannerisms are the same. Tony's very animated the way Alex can get sometimes. It's a really fascinating thing to watch. It's unfortunate we can't play all of the video of the conference because the similarities are just striking. But I was fortunate enough to catch up with him, get about a 15-minute interview after the conference, and I want you to watch this right now and listen very carefully to what he talks about. It sounds an awful lot to those of us down here at Access Television.
And then all phone calls.
Roll it.
I can hear him in there. It's coming.
Tony Brown of Tony Brown's Journal, the second longest running PBS television show, is also the best-selling author of Black Lives, White Lies. His new book is very, very important, and it documents the information that we've been discussing here on the Freedom Report and on Exposing Corruption for a long time. The criminal crime rings out of Europe. He's been on Fox News, ABC, CBS, you name it, but no more. They're shutting him out because he's talking about the big, dirty secret. He's talking about the Federal Reserve and the criminal crime rings out of Europe. So get ready. Here is Tony Brown at the LBJ Auditorium in Austin, Texas, discussing the reality that we have to face as a civilization. He discusses, he explains how the establishment uses their own religion as a way to have generational power. Religions are the best ways to pass down those type systems. So here is Tony Brown.
And he's got a new book out called Empower the People, which I have here, and I just wanted to ask you a few questions. I noticed in the book, to me, that's kind of broken up into three parts. You talk about the fact that there's a spiritual battle being waged, an economic battle being waged, and then some solutions, at least solutions you think are viable solutions to deal with them. I want to talk about the spiritual battle that's going on. You speak about the Illuminati in this book, which I think is significant because you are such a public figure. Can you tell us a little bit, just like a quick overview about the Illuminati?
Well, the Illuminati its original name was the Order of the Illuminati, or the Order of the Devil, and they were people who were aristocrats, intellectuals, people who did not believe in God, who believed in rationalism, as it was called in Europe, in the belief that you could be illuminated, as in Illuminati, as was Lucifer, which is why he was thrown out of heaven, and that pious religious belief is corny, based on superstition, and that each person can, if they follow the dictates of the devil, which they call Baphomet, or Lucifer, or we call Satan, that you can become God. And there's no need for a God. Now, that is a statement of fact. It was organized by Adam Weishaupt in Ingolstadt University in Bavaria, Germany. It succeeded down through the years. And people
About what time frame was that?
I think it's 1799.
So not too long after the formation of this country.
Well, it was, no. It was organized in 1776. May the 1st, which is where May Day comes from. And people think May Day is a celebration of communism. It isn't a celebration of the Illuminati. Communism is a manufactured, phony political concept of the Illuminati. So the Illuminati plays on both sides. But this was in 1776. As a matter of fact, on the American dollar, when you see "In God We Trust," pious Christians, Jews, and Muslims believe it means the Creator God, but it really refers to their God because they have the seal of the Illuminati on the dollar bill. As a matter of fact, at the base of the pyramid on the seal, if you take the 9 Roman numerals, split them into 3 each, 666. Add up the bottom, you get 666. So they're everywhere. But it should not surprise anybody, although it does, because people don't think anyone is this mean to do this. But there are people who believe in God, as you and I do. There are people who believe in goodness, as you and I do. But there are people who believe that there is no God, that there is a devil, who believe in evil. And in my book, I simply document that. And that's simply a part of a generational, passed along religion that has remained underground for very obvious reasons, and they focus on the accumulation of wealth, and their religion is this Illuminism.
Since you're short on time, I'll get straight to my next question about the Federal Reserve. That's the battle that's being waged, I think, or at least a portion of it on the economic front. You mentioned in the town hall meeting earlier about formation of your own money system and it being backed by gold. Now, I know the significance of this, and I know the significance of the Federal Reserve and its collection branch, the IRS. Can you explain to our audience a little bit about what you have found about that and document very well?
I can refer them to a recent event. Former President George Bush was interviewed by David Frost in the last few months. And he blamed Alan Greenspan for his loss of the election in 1996.
Because he inflated the money supply.
Well, I'm saying that the chairman of the Federal Reserve can elect or unelect anyone running for president. Now, I'm not saying that Mr. Greenspan did that. I have no evidence that he did. But as I say in my book, had he wanted to defeat Bill Clinton, he could have done that. And the Federal Reserve is not a part of the federal government. The Federal Reserve is plank 2 of the Communist Manifesto, written by Karl Marx and Illuminati, financed by crony capitalists from Wall Street, to put a left wing on their movement so they could have both ends of it. Political spectrum. And that the second plank in the Communist Manifesto is the income tax, which is really, IRS is really the collection agency of the Federal Reserve. So in effect, you have two major communist institutions parading as capitalist institutions. And in effect, we don't really have capitalism or communism. We have a confluence of Illuminism. So the Federal Reserve really, and one of the most striking examples is that we now have a concept the Federal Reserve uses called NAIRU, the natural rate of natural unemployment, natural rate of unemployment, and NAIR use the acronym. And it's based on the fact that we need a minimum of 6% unemployment to restrain inflation. That means that if too many people work, we have an inflated economy. Goods and services cost too much, when in effect, inflation can and is only caused by a Federal Reserve that inflates the amount of currency in circulation, which debases the amount of dollars already in circulation. So it creates inflation, and it says in order to fight inflation, we must keep a minimum of 6% of all Americans unemployed, which translates into about 25 to 30% of blacks and Hispanics, and the American people applauded and give this man great awards for controlling inflation.
And I've got to tell you, and that is something you can prove. You can't prove Alan Greenspan necessarily gets people elected or unelected, but you can prove. As a matter of fact, I just downloaded it this morning, a file from a federal website from the General Accounting Office. It's a report stating that the Federal Reserve is printing money so fast that the Crane Paper Company, who makes the paper for our Federal Reserve dollars, or their Federal Reserve dollars, I guess I should say, cannot keep up and is looking at contracting a German and a Swiss company to help with the production of paper.
Well, the Federal Reserve has not made a secret of that. They announced on page 1 of USA Today about 4 weeks ago that they're increasing the money supply, the currency, by 1/3 because they want to stave off panic from people who are going to be worried next year, 1999, about the Y2K problem, which beyond a shadow of a doubt is going to create a run on the banks. 43% of all information technology specialists, people who know what's going to happen, have said in a survey they're going to take their money out of the banks in 1999. And add on top of that the number of banks that will not be compliant. So there's no doubt that we're going to have an inflationary spiral because, and secondly, we don't have a sound economy. We don't have a surplus. We have a $500 billion deficit, and all you got to do is call the Concord Coalition, hardly a conspiracy group, and they will give you the facts on how much you've got. Newsweek magazine also published a story on the fact that we do not have a surplus. If you count right, you'll know we have a major deficit.
And if you count the unfunded liabilities the government has, instead of the $6 trillion debt that they speak of, we're actually $19 trillion in debt, which is important to know.
No, there's interest on the liabilities, and it gets you to $500 billion.
Oh, okay. Well, I was talking about the debt, not the deficit. But anyways, also, I guess finally, before you go, your book talks about, and this is what I like, and this is what we talk about on our show, action. It's you can sit there and talk about these problems, and they can wear you down and they can break your will. But what kind of things do you suggest that people can do action to protect themselves and their family against these types of situations that we see going on?
Well, I have 7 steps, and the first step is learn how to create wealth. Money is the currency of power. In the United States, 1% of the population controls 99% of the wealth. 99% of the population controls 10% of the wealth. Now, if money is the currency of power, and you have power because you have money, 99% of Americans cannot possibly live in a democracy. So the first thing Americans must do is to create a mechanism to get their money back under their own control. Not work until the middle of June to make the first dollar of the year, and you've given the rest of it to the government. The second thing is I have created a money system, a freedom, just like the dollar.
And it's completely legal as long as it's not hard coin.
Completely legal, It's going to be backed by gold, and the IRS is not going to put me in jail because I'm going to put it together in a way where I am not responsible for the people who spend it. Therefore, I will sell the freedom, but if I give it away, if I sell it, then they want me to be accountable for it. So I'm figuring out a way where they can't put me in jail because I help people keep their money.
Very good. One last thing. You talked about year 2000 problems, and you stressed the date December 31st, 1999. I've been led to believe, and since you have knowledge of this much more than mine, aren't we also going to see problems essentially midnight April 15th, 1999, because that's the fiscal year changeover for government entities? Isn't that a problem as well?
Many governments, I think of January 1999, about 31 state governments go on their year 2000 fiscal calendar. So yes, we're going to see problems then. We're going to have a major test of the power grids, the electric power grids around March. Wall Street would said that it was testing its Y2K compliance the middle of 98. Did not. It simply had an exercise, but it must test no later than March of 1999, at which time I predict that the stock market will plummet because we'll find out how many companies are not Y2K compliant. The problems aren't going to wait until December the 31st, 1999. We already have them. Some banks in Texas right now will not allow you to withdraw more than $200 on your ATM because they don't have the money in the bank. And they're coming up with a lot of other excuses. Plus, they're afraid that their technology is not going to work. We're going to have a very, very, very serious problem in this country. And this is what local communities must plan for.
And a final question. I personally see a growing militarization of our police. Do you, first of all, would you agree with that? And second of all, do you think it's related to this year 2000 computer problem?
I don't know if it is or not, but I know the mayor of New York has built building a $19 million bunker. I know that when the mayor came out and brought the police force out to watch the so-called Million Youth March organized by a very black radical type man, that he at that point brought in a military unit called the New York Police with helicopters, tanks, mace, tactics that were psychologically constructed, and it was an experiment. You could see they were experimenting, and they did it in Harlem, so many white people didn't think it would have any effect on them, but they were really practicing up for the suburbs. And I'd like to say this for your white viewers, that the jails were not built for black men. They used the prejudice against black men to build jails for white people who, once they wake up to what's going on, say the white population has no history of being tolerant. It's very intolerant with government abuse. The black community is a very tolerant community, and I think you're going to have a very different result when enough Timothy McVeighs join enough militias. And so, you know, the bottom line is they're playing with fire. But they now are increasing the budgets of police units, which have become military units, at a time when crime is going down. So you know the plan is not to fight crime.
And terrorism is at a 25-year low across the world, and yet we're stepping up anti-terrorism legislation and anti-terrorism training and funding and things of that nature. It ties right in.
Flight 800 on TWA will crash, and they will say the terrorists did it, racket up so-called security at the airport. I was trying to travel from Philadelphia to Cincinnati when that happened, and I had to produce a federal piece of identification. I said, I'm not going to Yugoslavia. I just want to go to Cincinnati. And like I was in another country. Now when you go to the airport, what they do to you at the airport, we wouldn't have tolerated 20 or 30 years ago. No evidence of any terrorist activity.
It's incrementalism.
Incrementally, they are increasing this militarization of the American society, and they're increasing the power of the central government over the people of this country. This is not a black or white issue. And the point in my book that I make is that we didn't all come over on the same ship, but we're all in the same boat. And blacks and whites had better read Frederick Hegel and understand that we're being manipulated by Hegelian principles, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And if we don't, see, every time a black person and a white person work together, I'm not into that integration silliness, busing and holding hands. But every time blacks and whites work together to accumulate mutual power as Americans, we take one step closer to freedom. Every time we fight one another over racism and racial differences, we move one step away from being a free people.
I agree. I was brought up raised, you have friends because you have something in common. And if you concentrate on what's different about each other, you'll never find anything in common to learn to get along. Right. And you're exactly right. When you have common goals, and I say Americans rather than Afro-American or Black American or White American, American is that key phrase there. If we all decide to be Americans, then we can do something about this. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
It was a pleasure, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll call you later on for Alex's show.
As long as, quote, they do it
There you have it.
Very good,
Brown,
man. What a
American,
good
Well,
job.
no, like I said, the key there is, and this is kind of a message directed towards everybody. Elizabeth called and gave us a tip about him being down there. This was not a very publicized event, this town hall meeting. He actually, and I wish, maybe I'll edit together a video for it. There's a lot of footage from this conference where he fields a lot of different questions and talks a lot about what's going on, not just in the black community, but in the American community. And I just, not only do I want to thank Elizabeth, but it's important to everybody out there. We get a lot of phone calls, what can we do, what can we do? If you see something like that going on, send us a tip. Heck, go down there and do the interview for yourself. If you got a video camera, make sure it's on SP. Go do stories on your own and submit them. We'll run them for you or do the editing down here to run stories like this. You can call that comment line that's up there, 370-9558, or you can email me at slane@moment.net, SLANE@moment.net. It's important that more people become reporters and go out and get interviews like this and make these types of contacts and get them on, Alex's show and Jeff's show and my show and everybody's shows so that we can get this kind of information out. And I think it's just great to see somebody so mainstream, so very public, come out and say, I mean, verbatim what we...
Exactly. If Jesse Jackson had been here, all the news stations would have been there, and Jesse would have been saying, the federal government has to give us more money. This guy's saying, get a job, work, take care of yourself, work together. Folks, it's a totally different message. Jesse Jackson is a 32nd degree Mason. This man is an American who believes in America and the prosperity of all races. Absolutely. Folks, this is, if we don't watch out, there is going to be what's called Hegelian theory. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis, or problem, reaction, solution. There are going to be racial wars unless we start realizing that all black Americans, all Hispanic Americans, all Asian Americans, and all European Americans, we're all in the same boat together, and we could all lose our freedoms together.
Well, we're all Americans.
We're all Americans.
Everybody needs to realize
and folks, what is happening, just like Oklahoma City and Waco, is this planned problem, this planned racial war between blacks and whites. Folks on both sides, whether you're black or white, don't fall for it.
And that's exactly what he talked about in that conference, by the way. He said, hey, we've got to get over this and move on and work within our own spheres of influence, as he called them.
Let's hear from the people.
Caller, you're on the air.
Hey.
What's going on?
Old Recon, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, Recon?
Man, what a clip.
Isn't that great?
You get a gold star, all of you.
This guy, what about that interviewer?
Well,
what about
Elizabeth
that interviewer?
Too, and there was another woman who came into play. I don't want to mention her name because I don't want to compromise what she does at her work. And then Mike worked real hard on it. Alex worked real hard editing that. I mean, that just shows teamwork. And that's why I want to get more people involved.
I'll tell you what, that's what we need is more of that, and that was excellent. And going along with what you've been talking about, were you aware that real estate in Hong Kong has dropped 75%? $100,000 home there now, fellas. If you got 25 grand in your pocket, you can buy a home there.
And it's still overpriced.
Yeah, it is.
I was in Japan not too long ago, and even though things have come down, they've got a lot further ways to coming down.
Right. Now, can you explain to me in banking terms, I guess, George, what watering is?
Well, why don't you explain it, because I'm not quite sure. I mean, if you're talking about the increase of what's called M3, which is the money supply, is that what you're referring to?
I believe that's what I'm trying to get at, is that they're putting a greater value on something than it really has.
Well, that's exactly what we talked about earlier. Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, Germany, and now the United States have turned on their printing presses. As we've talked about, there's not enough paper to make the Federal Reserve notes. And you get more and more and more Federal Reserve note dollars out there.
Yeah.
And the value of your hard assets become worth less and less and less. Folks, and again, we're not making this stuff up. It's happening all over the world. But you can't, the fact is the Japanese have a $4 trillion debt, an International Monetary Fund through the World Bank, and they're going to have to pay it, and they're going to have to come and get their T-bills, their $2 trillion T-bills out of the United States. and all of their other monies, and they are invested heavily in the American derivative market. And when that derivative market goes short, and I know this is kind of economic mumbo-jumbo, but the bottom line is that a lot of American middle class are going to get wiped right out.
Right. Now, one more thing and then I'll let you all go. You all know that in Scripture, God destroyed the earth once by a flood, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course he set the rainbow there as a reminder that he will never do that again.
Right.
And you go to the book of Revelations in chapter 12, it talks about how the great red dragon goes after the remnant of Israel's seed, and he creates a flood. And the actual wording in here, it is a monetary flood. And this is exactly what we're seeing right now today, folks. Strangely enough, it says right after that, but the earth helps the woman. So something is going to happen, and it looks like it's going to be a worldwide monetary crash. And then we are going to get some help. I don't quite understand what it means that the earth will help the woman, but we're seeing prophecy coming full bore at us.
It's interesting you bring that up. Mr. Brown on Alex's show on Saturday night brought up the point in his closing remarks, and I thought it was a really excellent point. He said, we have nothing to fear. He said the Scripture tells us what the outcome is. We already know the outcome is a good one. We have nothing to fear. This battle will be won. But that doesn't mean that we sit by inactive.
Exactly.
And it's my opinion, and again, it's just my opinion. Right. I'm not a biblical scholar or anything like that, but that this return is going to happen, take place through flesh and blood, take place through men. Christ himself was ultimately flesh and blood. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't believe, God's going to send a magical lightning bolt to fix all this stuff.
No.
I think he sent men to do it. I think we're all here together to work together to do it for him. And I would like to think, at least believe that that's what's moving me in my heart to do what I do.
Right. Well, so far, gentlemen, this is your best show ever.
Well, thank you very much.
God bless you all, and thank you.
All right.
I want to speak just briefly about this because I've done a little bit of study on this. Every major religion around the world has its own prophecy. And no matter what religion you are, whether you're Jewish or you're Christian or you're Buddhist or Hindu or Muslim, there is prophecy that talks about this period of time. Now, we are here to talk more about the political and the objective information, but folks, this is a spiritual conflict, and the people who believe in, who created the Constitution, our founding fathers, Ben Franklin said, either we are ruled by God or we're ruled by tyrants. And this is about either seeing the divinity in all people and respecting their rights as part of God's world, or whether you see the world as a very materialistic level and that there is no God and that you're supposed to take all the power you can. And with a constitutional republic, it respects the individuality and the divinity of the individual. Without our constitutional republic, we lose that. And without that mentality, you move toward materialistic socialism.
That's right. What we have now is statism, where we, in essence, are viewing the state as God, and that's
Right.
where we're paying our homage and not respecting the rights of the individual. We're making sure everything is on behalf of the state, which in essence is God, the way it is right now. Caller, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so you say this is like a spiritual battle, huh?
I'd say there's several battles going on, but among them is the spiritual battle, yes.
Yeah. Well, personally, I think it's a personal war between God and the devil. Is that true?
No matter whether you're religious or not, no matter what your religious beliefs are, you've got to admit this is pretty much sizing up to be the classic battle between good and evil.
There's one thing that's very interesting, is that the founder of the Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt, was a stated Satanist. Then Giuseppe Mazzini, who took over the Illuminati, was a Luciferian. And then you had Albert Pike, who was a Luciferian. And then you have the people who are in charge of the Illuminati. And again, folks, we don't make this stuff up. It's all in the reference books, have all been Satanists and Luciferians. And whatever that means, but I know that that doesn't mean the respect of God's word. You know, whatever religion you are.
Well, how come God allows it to go on? That's the question.
Well, I think that's a question that all of mankind's been asking for a long time, and all Christians. I'm going to get to a bunch of other calls. I appreciate it, by the way.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, you know, you were talking about documentation. The back of Tony Brown's book has 31 pages. 31 pages of footnotes of where he got his references, where he got all his quotations, all his information. I mean, you talk about documented. That is a heavily documented book. Caller, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yeah,
Hello.
go ahead.
This is Elizabeth calling.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hey, what's going on?
I'm calling to let you know BOSS stands for Business Opportunity Symposium Series.
Oh, okay. I appreciate it, because I never did learn what it was, and then I said an acronym, which isn't correct. But
Excellent interview, Steve.
well, thank you very much.
Enjoyed it.
I
Bye-bye.
owe it all to you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for everything.
Okay, we're going to get to one more phone call, I think. Caller, you're on the air.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Hello.
Good evening. This has been the best show you've had thus far, I'm quite certain.
Well, thank you.
My wife said, make certain that you said, God bless America and death to the New World Order before you departed.
That's exactly right.
That was an excellent interview with Mr. Brown. I've got a lot of respect for that gentleman. I just wish it had been advertised a little better.
Yeah, I know. You know,
This sounds like Dave. Is this you, Dave?
Yes, it is.
The sad part is there was only about 30 people down there total, and I just think had there been any sort of advertisement at all, you know, we certainly could have doubled that with the people that's in our immediate sphere of influence. And it's unfortunate, but I think it has a lot to do with what George was talking about. Stephanie Rochon from Fox 7 News was the moderator. They did a little clip about it, but she didn't ask Tony any questions about the Federal Reserve. In fact, she didn't interview him at all. And I think it has to do with exactly that. Well, heck, even Tony in some private conversations talked about the fact that the interview he did with Fox 7 News, which we've run clips of where the guy tries to belittle him and make him seem like he's crazy, this, that, and the other. Tony admitted, he said, well, he had to do that because if he didn't do that, he'd have been fired the next day.
That's probably true.
I think we saw some of that this weekend.
And this is a bit of a change of subject, but George, I heard something very disturbing to me today. I understand the FDIC is also a privately owned organization. Is that correct?
I am not 100%. I've heard that several times. I know that the Federal Reserve System is a private organization, and most of the stockholders are European financiers. It is my information, but not my absolute knowledge that what you've said is correct.
Okay. I think that's going to be our last call. I'm going to step out here, and I'm going to let Rusty and George close this for me. That book that Tony Brown just recently wrote is called Empower the People, a 7-step plan to overthrow the conspiracy that is stealing your money and freedom.
Reference only.
Yeah,
this
exactly.
is reference only.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, he also is the author of a book called Black Lies, White Lies. This is a very, I'm not going to say powerful, but a very mainstream, extremely respected individual. And to hear him say the exact same things that we always talk about, I think gives everyone down at Access Television a great deal of credibility. Before I step out, I just want to thank Rusty for being here.
Pleasure to
tonight.
be here, Steve.
I want to thank
Great
George.
interview.
And
hey, man.
Hey, man. Appreciate everybody being here. Don't forget, your heart is free. Have the courage to follow it. Stay tuned for the Ritter's television show. And I'm sorry, Chris, I always forget the name of your show. But The Tie That Binds, of course. And tune in to Alex Jones tomorrow for his show, Exposing Corruption. And I believe that starts at 8 o'clock. I appreciate it, everybody. Thanks a lot.
George?
Well, anyway, these are very exciting times in this country, and I think that it's really important that people don't get sucked into the lie of the Bill Clinton charade right now. The fact is that a very powerful elite control our media, they control our banks, they control our political parties, and it is up to us as citizens of this country to become aware of the truth. Don't believe what we're saying, but listen to what we're saying, get the reference material, and thanks for listening.
I just want to pick up on what George just said. Please, don't take our word for it. We want you to go out and empower yourself with knowledge, with the facts.
All right, sorry to interrupt here. Stay tuned right here on these channels for more classics from Mike Hanson Archives. But I just want to take a moment to ask for your help to fund these channels. We are asking a $25 donation to buy my book. I wrote this book about Bohemian Grove, about when Alex Jones and I snuck into the Bohemian Grove Club, and it tells all about it. Tex Mars forwarded it. He just recently passed away, so it's becoming a real collector's item. Alex has his own chapter in this book, and it's very good, full of pictures and all sorts of things. You know, George W. Bush and his father was a member of the Bohemian Club, and Junior still is. But it's a really good, thick book, and we'd appreciate a $25 donation sent to. I will definitely sign it and send it right back to you. If you want to call us at 830-672-3089, that's my office. Just leave your name and phone number, and the secretary will call you back. And you can pay with a credit card. And if you want to write us, our address is 901 St. Joseph Street, Gonzales, Texas, 78629. Once again, send that $25 for this book right here, Bohemian Grove, Cult of Conspiracy. I wrote that book, forwarded it by Tex Mars. Alex Jones has a chapter in it, and a lot of other people. So we appreciate. Stay tuned to these local YouTube channels and Facebook and Instagram, and I'm on Twitter now too. So stay tuned for Mike Hanson Archives and all the classics. Most of these tapes are 25 years old or a little bit younger. Alrighty, thanks a lot and God bless. Please support us when you can, where you can. Here's the address one more time and the phone number, and we'll get right back to your viewing of these classics. Be sure to go to Mike Hanson Archives, Hanson Archives, and our new one, Waco Archives. Thanks a lot and God bless.
Anybody want to come up here? All right, that's it. All right, who wants to lead? Let Gene go. Go ahead. Yes, sir. All right. God bless the Republic.